Hi, I'm Erica. I wanted to start recording my journey with my health stuff, especially in case things start to get a little crazy in terms of treatment. There's so much I don't even know where to start. So in November 2020, my family had COVID, and me and my little one didn't really have much cold symptoms. We just kind of were really tired and a little bit of an elevated temperature. I don't think went above like 99.5. I did get to like 100 one night, but other than that, I was like 99s. The whole family, my husband and older son, were more symptomatic in terms of cough and runny nose and all that stuff that you would expect to happen. Neither of which had a fever either. But I think around 14 days in, I started experiencing heart palpitations when I stood up. So I remember specifically I was trying to fold laundry and I just got so tired trying to like lift my arms to fold the laundry, which still happens. It's really, really annoying. I just remember needing to go lay down. So I ordered a pulse ox. So then whenever my heart rate started going, or when I started feeling palpitations, I started playing with the pulse ox and realizing like when I would stand up, my heart rate would go like shoot up from 80s to 120s. And but I like knew nothing about what was normal for a heart rate, you know. I was trying to put away groceries and it went up to like 140s. I just kept getting more symptoms and I was scared, but I was still working remotely. And even whenever I had COVID, I didn't stop working remotely. I never spent a day in bed, which now I'm reading is actually a risk factor for long COVID if you don't stop and take care of yourself. So don't do that. Since I started having the heart rate increases, I started Googling that obviously, and I found something called POTS. No, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So dysautonomia is a dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system. So anything that your body does automatically, like breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, temperature control, that's all automatic. And the nervous system controls that. And if it has a problem, then those things are gonna not work as well as they should. Basically, you stand up, your heart rate goes up, and it's beyond 30 beats. That's abnormal, and that could get you the diagnosis of POTS as long as your blood pressure remains stable. So what I eventually ended up finding out via going to a cardiologist or a neurologist for this was that my blood pressure was actually dropping substantially, which was making my heart then work really hard to try to, to try to bring the blood pressure up and circulate the blood so that, you know, gravity happens when you stand up. Gravity happens all the time, but when you stand up, it tries to move the blood. So then your heart has to work really hard to get the blood continue circulating where it needs to be. And if there's no blood in your brain, for me, what started happening more would my eyes go black this way, like I start seeing black this way, and then it will take over the whole thing, and then my ears go like underwater and completely muffly. At this point I'm on the floor usually, but when I first start seeing, like I get a little warning, I first start seeing the blackout and I can take myself down onto the floor so that I don't fall, collapse. If it happens too quickly or I'm just trying to do one more thing, then I do collapse and have to kind of just chill out on the ground and wait for my blood pressure and heart rate stabilized so that I can move, because there's like literally no blood in the brain. And so also during these times when I started collapsing, I was also really confused, like cognitively not there. So I couldn't then explain why I'm on the floor or what I needed, which makes it really difficult, especially if you're in public. Like for instance, I was at a doctor's appointment once and trying to check out, and the lady was taking too long for like checking me out on the computer and trying to make me another appointment. And I can't stand in one spot that long without passing out sometimes. So I was like, I gotta sit, and I just like sat right in front of the desk. I probably didn't say I have to sit. It all happened so quick. And then like when she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I'm fine." And that's like all I can say. Or sometimes I'll be like, "Yeah, I have a heart issue," or I don't know what to tell people. So anyways, also the day I lost smell and taste, December 11th, 2020. I know because I had a doctor's appointment that day, telehealth. I got hives all over my body. Today I'm recording this. It's April 9th, 2022. And I still have hives if I stop taking Zyrtec. So the first diagnoses I got after COVID were orthostatic hypotension, which is orthostatic is standing up. Hypotension is low blood pressure. So that was diagnosed with a dysautonomia specialist neurologist who did a tilt table test where they just sit you, or they put you on a bed, in a hospital bed, and then they just simply lift it up. Like whenever I was reading about this test, I thought that they were like gonna put me upside down or something crazy. But literally they just want you standing, and they have you hooked up to like an EKG and a blood pressure thing and a pulse ox and all the things, heart rate monitor, so that they can see what your vitals are doing when you're standing. And the only reason they have you strapped down is because like they're doing these tests on people that pass out. So that test can also be done like at home if you have a pulse ox or a blood pressure cuff. Just because you see your heart rate going up doesn't mean your blood pressure is not dropping, which would mean that you don't get the POTS diagnosis, you would get the orthostatic hypotension diagnosis. So that's kind of important, even though they treat them the same way. So that was the one diagnosis. The other thing was suspected mast cell activation syndrome. So because of the hives, wheezing, stomach stuff, weird rashes, I saw an allergist. That was actually the first specialist I saw. I had read about mast cell activation syndrome because a lot of people with POTS, dysautonomia, orthostatic hypotension, have mast cell activation syndrome. It's common for people with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic difference in our collagen. They don't really know the root of it yet. They're looking for the gene to identify it, but a lot of those people have what they were calling the trifecta: Ehlers-Danlos, POTS, and mast cell activation syndrome. So mast cell activation syndrome is whenever your mast cells are misbehaving. They are the guardsmen of the body, the police. They fight the things, and they release different mediators to help your body fight. Sorry, this cat, he's 15, and he's in kidney failure, and he likes to eat my fingers because they're salty, because I have to eat a lot of salt. Mast cell activation syndrome is like the mast cells misbehaving. They're degranulating and releasing too many mediators, so you're going to get a lot of inflammation and allergy type symptoms, and you are basically in like a low level anaphylaxis, although it seems it can also play out with just like inflammation and body pain, and they can wreak a lot of havoc. So mast cells have been shown to go crazy after COVID, as well as other infections, whether viral or bacterial. And people with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, this genetic mutant component, hypermobile type, they do not know what gene is affected. It got lumped with Ehlers-Danlos syndromes, which there's 14 of them, but the hypermobile type itself, they can't find the cause of it yet, and they're trying to. And it's much more prevalent than the other Ehlers-Danlos. So, for example, I didn't know that I was hypermobile because I'm not comparing myself, running around stretching my skin and bending. So after I got sick and I saw that I had POTS and likely mast cell activation syndrome, I realized, I am very hypermobile. And so then I was like, oh, well, that explains why I have always dislocated everything. I have always dislocated and had like a prolapse when I had my son, and muscle tears, ligament stuff. All these diagnoses are so complex, and there's a lot to know and digest, and they're not well recognized, although I don't feel that they're uncommon at all, but they're not well recognized. So I got into the COVID clinic in July 2021. It was ran by pulmonology because, we thought COVID was like a lung thing and that's it. And she wasn't surprised by anything I was telling her, which was good. And I already had gone through a lot of the testing that they would have recommended. So really, she referred me to a cardiologist, a different allergist for treatment that was like in their network, and then exercise therapy for my exercise intolerance. I already had a physical therapist because of the bendy person problem. I have a lot of body pain. I had been doing physical therapy to tighten up the muscles around my joints. And honestly, it was amazing. It had taken my everyday pain from probably like a 6 or 7 to like 0 or 1. It was wonderful. So whenever she recommended I see another physical therapist, I did my eval there just to see if they were doing something different for like long COVID. So at this point, like the test she did was like a 6-minute walk test, which I had no problem walking for 6 minutes at this point. Now I might not be able to, but the testing she did not induce my symptoms, and therefore she didn't really have recommendations. I also did a cognitive eval because I was having brain fog, although at this point in July it wasn't bad. Like I said to her when she asked about brain fog, I was like, well, I have ADHD, I have post-concussion syndrome, I'm already a little bit meh, so I couldn't really tell you if it's been worse. And when it got worse, I will tell you, I knew it got worse. I decided to move forward with physical therapy first, and then later on I would add the cognitive therapy, which is different than cognitive behavioral therapy. It wasn't like a talk therapist. This was a speech therapist that was helping me like after a concussion or an Alzheimer's patient. So that's something I also did. It didn't really end up helping that much in terms of my capacity, enhancing my capacity, because the symptoms basically affect my cognition, right? But she did teach me a whole lot of like occupational therapy type things, like making lists and setting alarms and that kind of thing. So she was really helpful. I started doing the physical therapy. Me and my normal physical therapist, who I already trusted, looked into like what they were doing for post-COVID and started trying some of those things. It was very simple. Like, I did some breathing exercises, which felt great. And then he had me do 6 minutes on the exercise bike. And for reference, before I got sick, my work had a gym, and I was able to do 30 minutes on the elliptical. And it wasn't, I wasn't totally in shape, so it wasn't like the funnest thing on earth, but it wasn't a problem, especially not the next day. If it was a problem, it was like a problem in the moment, like just like any not in shape person. And the 6 minutes during my physical therapy was not a problem either. My heart rate went really high and my blood pressure, it wasn't dropping though. And he said, it's normal for those things to happen when you're exercising. So every week we would do 6 minutes. The first time I did 6 minutes of cardio on the exercise bike, it was 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. And then that night I got really sick, like a flu sick. And I had also started a new medication for the orthostatic hypotension. So I thought that I was having a reaction to my medication. I'm sorry, I was having a reaction to my medication. I had ulcers all under my tongue and down my throat. So I had an allergic reaction to my medication. And I thought maybe the flu symptoms were just that. So it took me like 4 days to feel better. And I was just really sick for 4 days. Again, still working during all of this remote working. And I went back to physical therapy the next week, told him what happened, said, but I also had this allergic reaction going on. I can't totally blame the bike. So we tried again and had the same result. Very sick for 4 days, no allergic reaction during that point. So I said, okay, this is the bike. This is apparently too much for my body, which, was surprising, but okay. So he said, yeah, let's not do that again. He wasn't a jerk. And so we tried the stepper. Cognitive. We tried the stepper machine, which I had been doing 5 minutes of the whole time in physical therapy, and it wasn't a problem, but I was doing it very leisurely. So now we started the stepper every week for 6 minutes, and it took, probably 4 times of that trying to beat my own goal or whatever. The last time I did it, trying to go a little farther, a little harder. It took 6 weeks, or like probably 4 weeks of that, until that started inducing a crash. And then I let myself crash probably 3 weeks of doing that until I said, okay, this is definitely the bike and this is not working. And this, by that point I had a little hint of what post-exertional malaise was, but not really. I just didn't understand that you can totally become bedbound and unable to leave your house and disabled. So in the beginning of October, I just started collapsing a lot, and just my capabilities were very low. And when I started the exercise, I also developed a tremor, which scared me. And I thought, okay, maybe, COVID brought out, I was just going to get like MS or Parkinson's anyways. And this is that, right? And orthostatic hypotension is like really common in Parkinson's. So my normal neurologist, who's a dysautonomia expert, was booked for 6 months because, people were getting COVID and getting long COVID and getting dysautonomia. So I went to a new neurologist because just to tell her about the tremor. The other thing that started in October was the severe cognitive difficulties. So not just when I'm on the ground, like having a blood pressure drop, but like I couldn't remember everyday words, which is still happening clearly while I'm recording these. And, like basket, bench, that happens to everybody sometimes, but not all day. And the one thing that really scared me was I couldn't remember some of my family members' names. So this was the point where I discovered that chronic fatigue syndrome isn't just feeling tired, and that people with chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME, have a decreased ability to exert themselves due to a handful of different pathophysiological changes in the body. The gas exchange isn't working appropriately to oxygenate tissues, energy metabolism, our mitochondria aren't properly creating energy, and the only surefire effective treatment for anyone with ME/CFS is to pace themselves and not overdo things. So that is when I decided that I needed to take a break from work, take a little leave and try to rest to recover.